Even today, Alaska is a wild place, with many areas still unseen by modern man. 139 years ago, there were almost no roads in Alaska, and the only means of transport was by sea. In October 1867, the United States purchased this vast and unexplored territory from Russia for less than 2 cents an acre. The following spring, American officials dispatched a wooden sailing bark called the Torrent with Army troops and supplies to build a military garrison on the rocky coast of Cook Inlet. The men aboard were a mixed lot of sailors and soldiers, many of them veterans of the bloody wars between the states. All told, the Torrent carried more than 150 men, women, and children. On July 15, 1868, the Torrent struck an offshore reef, grinding against the rocks and gradually breaking apart in the ice-cold waters of Cook Inlet. Miraculously, everyone aboard made it off the ship and reached the beach, where they would be rescued nearly 3 weeks later. The Torrent broke apart on the rocks and slipped from sight. Generations passed, and the story of the Torrent's mission and destruction were nearly lost to history. My name is Steve Lloyd. This summer I set out to find the sunken remains of this magnificent ship and to tell her story for the first time in 138 years.
My safety divers have already geared up and entered the water, and in a moment I'll be joining them as we resume our search for the remains of the Torrent. There's a lot of copper spikes down there. What I believe we found is a section of wooden wreckage that had broken off from the main part of the ship. As the marine organisms consume the wood, the spikes dropped out and now litter the gravel, almost like dropping them out of the sky. A sailing ship like this, even though it was constructed of wood, had a great deal of iron in its construction. Everything from parts of the rigging, chains, railings, many parts of a wooden sailing ship that should be iron, and I didn't find a single one. That's part of what has me convinced that this isn't the main wreck site. I'm going to come aboard and get this equipment off. Well, the visibility here is excellent. The water is clear and filled with marine life. Problem is that there's so much kelp blanketing the bottom, sticking to the rocks and covering every square inch of the seafloor, that it's virtually impossible to see anything but marine life and plant growth. In my experience, a shipwreck, once it's been on the bottom for 100 years or more in shallow water, has been broken up and beaten flat into the seafloor. So what we're looking for is not so much an intact ship with recognizable features. Instead, we're trying to imagine what the pieces and components of the ship are going to look like after being on the bottom for so many years. What I was able to find on this dive was an old tarnished copper spike or piece of pipe about 3 or 4 feet long, twisted and half driven into the gravel floor underneath an enormous boulder the size of a SUV or a minivan. Now I've marked that spot. That will allow another diver on the team to follow the line down to the spike or the piece of pipe and begin their search from that location, expanding outwards in hopes of finding other artifacts that might establish this as the final resting place of the sailing bark Torrent.